Does Hamas have a pay for slay program? This is another thing we hear a lot about on the news. And I think this is vitally important to know when it comes to speaking about Hamas. Is the pay for slay program real? And if it is, what is it?
Look, Hamas' biggest weapon is not money. It's the power of idea. And especially when there is an idea about some other life, a promise not in this life, but in the afterlife.
Mm.
And when you are political, religious, ideological, national, you have movement, you have so many ways to manipulate the human mind and misguide it into this type of rabbit holes where there is no end to their matrix, and how they trap youngsters to serve them, actually believing that through bloodshed you are pleasing Allah. And there is nothing worse than this combination. When you take someone who's, let's say, in principle, have some political hatred towards Israel, maybe some nationalism or devotion to something, and then you add to that, say, hey, and if you die in the afterlife, there are promises of infinite life, infinite pleasure. There is no pain there. You please Allah by committing suicide, by shedding your own blood. And there is no higher mean of worship than jihad. This is their ideology. So now there are many escapists in bad economy, in poverty, coming from refugee camps, filled with hatred. Like right now, you look at Gaza, and there is a whole generation that hate Israel, but they, instead of, like, for example, hating Hamas for using them as human shields. And unfortunately, youngsters, they don't have the power of discernment, and they don't have, I mean, it took me how many years to break out of Hamas bondage and their conditioning, the Islamic conditioning. I had to fight the good fight for many, many years to reshape myself and break free from such a delusion. It was so hard. It was the process was dying again and again and again on a regular basis, dying to everything I learned, where I was able to actually escape that matrix. So the challenge for many members of Hamas was like how to die, how to let go of the national identity, religious identity, all the false identities, and find who they are. And that's where it gets risky, because it means you let go of your security, you get out of your comfort zone, you walk into the unknown. Most likely your family would shun you, and there is a chance you get killed in the process. And this is the fear that everyone has to deal with. So it's better for them actually to stay in their imprisonment, pleasing the religious institution, religious authorities, having the public image as nationalists, as those who sacrifice for the country. And if they die in honor and glory, hoping that the promise of the afterlife will be fulfilled. In the meantime, if they can also profit, the Hamas would give them money, would give them funds, but money is not only Hamas game. It's a lot more complicated than just money. If you want to take, for example, what they did on October 7th, they said everyone who bring a hostage on the way back to Gaza after their attack, they would take $10,000 and an apartment. This is a substantial amount of money for Gazans. And
Wow.
when you promise people that you get an apartment and $10,000 in cash, means that you can start your life, you can build a family. And many of those savages went with lust to bring some hostages back. And this is why we have hundreds of hostages were captured on October 7th because of such a promise.
Got it. Wow. Okay. So I didn't know that. I had heard, but I wasn't sure that Hamas offered $10,000 for every hostage that they brought back. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's insane.
That's by their confessions. I heard one of their confessions. This is what came out of their mouth when they were arrested.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. are citizens in Gaza, innocent civilians, or just citizens, are citizens in Gaza supportive of Hamas? And if they don't support Hamas, are they free to say so without fear of being hurt or killed? Is there freedom of speech? Are they allowed to do that even if they don't agree with them?
Look, a majority of people voted for Hamas back in 2006. This is how Hamas came to power in Gaza. Many of the Gazans support Hamas before the election. Yeah. Hamas has its own members, has many families, tribes, entire communities that stand behind them. So there is a huge part of Gaza that support Hamas. Then there are enemies of Hamas because Hamas made many enemies in Gaza. But it looks like many of them are silent because of fear, and this does not take the responsibility away. Then there are others who cheering for Hamas out of hypocrisy because they're afraid that Hamas would still be in power tomorrow and Israel would fail their mission. So they are afraid what it will be like post, let's say, war if Hamas still in power. So they don't want to risk their future. And there are sincere supporters of Hamas, and they are huge. What's in common between, let's say, these three major classes of Gaza, if it's correct to say, their hatred towards Israel. And that's where it's scary. It's not how many people in Gaza support Hamas as much how many people in Gaza love Israel.
Mm.
And that's what you find a majority of Gazans who actually hate Israel. And it's their delusion, because there is no reason for them to hate Israel. Israel was nothing. Their greatest enemy is Hamas, is their own governing authority. But take for example, when Hamas brought the hostages back to Gaza, you could see thousands of people beating up hostages, cheering, celebrating. Just the same way they celebrated the 9/11 attacks. Very similar picture. And many of the rapes that happened on that day, October 7th, Hamas attacked first. They did their atrocities, their ethnic cleansing, but then there was a second wave and a third wave of Gaza civilians who invaded those communities, looting, raping, destroying. So many of the atrocities, the burning, many of the things that happened throughout that day, that sick day, for many, many hours, were committed by Gaza civilians. And this is what many people are not understanding this. In a society where they cannot condemn the savages, they agree with them, they cheer for them, then they have in common hatred towards Israel. What are we expecting when Israel is defending itself against a genocide, trying to prevent another event like this? In such a crazy Jewish trauma that throughout my life I hear the story never again, referring to the Holocaust, then all of a sudden it happened. And such a challenge for, I mean, the magnitude of Hamas attack on October 7th is just beyond war. It's beyond anyone's expectations. So the civilian casualties, if this is the point where you're trying to get, it's first of all on the hands of Hamas for using human shields. Second, Israel gave them a warning to evacuate northern Gaza, more than 21 days. What were they still doing in northern Gaza? Of course, they were given Hamas a cover. And in this case, they are partnering with Hamas. And if they get hit, then this is not Israel to blame. Second, you need to think of it. When top Hamas leaders, and Israel managed to kill a bunch of them so far, I mean, high profile. Hamas hid this for a long time, but when the truth came to the picture, it was revealed. But now, why Israel supposed to really miss an opportunity to assassinate a top Hamas leader? Because, for example, he was among his tribe, that his tribe included civilians, that there is actually his offspring there. So why Israel, in such an ugly scenario where there is a genocide committed against her, why would they think, no, we cannot kill this high-profile terrorist because we cannot harm his family? So in such a situation, it's not an easy war. It's a very, very ugly war, and you need to somehow rid of those people, and people die in war. This is why Hamas should have not initiated that war. Now, we come to another point. Does Hamas statistics about civilian casualties in Gaza count? Are they accountable? Are they their numbers legitimate? It's the only source that we're getting the information. And the footage of civilian casualty, many of it is coming from Syria, many years before the Gaza war. And just Hamas put some tag on it that this is Gaza. But many of the children photos that we see, it's coming from Syria, from different regions, were killed on the hands of Arab against Arab. But Hamas prepared for this propaganda prior to the war, knowing that they can send wave shocks in the world and just turn the entire world against Israel. So Israel would cease fire and have to negotiate over hostages. This is what Hamas wanted, to go in, destroy, hurt Israel so bad. Israel retaliates, then Hamas force the world to condemn Israel and beg for a ceasefire where Hamas get away with their crime, get legitimacy in the meantime. This is their game. So the civilian casualties, I don't know if we will ever know actually how many people died in Gaza. But if we talk about one of the most populated area on earth, and even if their statistic was correct, we say the magnitude of a genocide on October 7th cannot be even compared to 100,000 dying in Gaza, because in Gaza, the victims are war victims, very different than genocide victims. Genocide is the highest crime committed by humanity. There is nothing worse than that, especially when it includes raping, killing, burning, whatever it is, the ugliest acts savages can commit. To civilian casualties happening because of being used as human shields, first of all. Second, in an ugly war that Israel has no alternative. I don't know what Israel is supposed to do. Just send its children to go and be vulnerable to all type of booby traps and bombing and killing and stabbing on the hands of Gaza civilians, they call them. For example, we had one of the hostages. Just take this example. One of the hostages managed to escape. He was dual citizen, Russian-Israeli. He was captured at the party on October 7th. He managed to escape for about 4 days. Then finally, civilians caught him and brought him back to Hamas captivity. So we cannot be weak. You know, this is supposed to be my people. But you know, if I go to Gaza, I will not survive a minute. And I don't know how am I supposed to feel about this. I don't want the Gazan people to die. 10 years working with Israel undercover, my intention was to never target any civilian. And I did not have even any blood on my hands. But in the West Bank was completely different than Gaza, than this open war against savages. And sometimes it's inevitable. Look what the United States did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When Japanese savages attacked Pearl Harbor, the United States realized that this is it. When they just became suicidal, 400 airplanes going one-way ticket, just attacking the United States, the U.S. had to develop the dirty bomb. And they had to drop it approximately 4 years after Pearl Harbor attack, wiping out Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was very, very ugly. But you know what was the outcome? The war ended. So in war, people die. And we need to stop thinking, so what to do? If Hamas is using human shields, and this means that we have a premature ceasefire, then what about tomorrow? And what type of model we are giving to the rest of terrorist organizations, other Islamists and other criminal groups who would have just more lust for blood and destruction. So we cannot do this. We have to eradicate Hamas. And of course, it's a very sad reality. Can I be emotional about it? Can I connect emotionally to it? I am not sure. I was very emotional about the Thai workers a lot more than the civilians who died in Gaza. This is very strange. Like, I never shed a tear on the children dying in Gaza, and that sounds awful, but you can judge whatever you want. But when I thought about the 23 Thai workers who had nothing to do in this shit, I wept an entire day, non-stop. I could not explain myself or believe myself, because the Thai people were the nicest people in the world. They're just Thai workers, got caught up in this fire, and I could not imagine them in tunnels under the Gaza city. Think about the infants who were kidnapped, and the mother that was just so defenseless, carrying her two babies, you know, in the hands of, in the face of savages. So it's really not measured by about how many civilians die in here and how many civilians die in there, and if it's not about scaling death here and there. It's why people died on October 7th, what really defined the problem. Why and how, in comparison to why and how on the Gazan side.